Abraham? And Abraham replied, here I am. Next. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up, loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Mount Moriah is where the temple of Solomon was built. Later on. And he said to his servant, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship. Then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. And he carried the fire and a knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, Father. He said, yes, my son. Abraham replied, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? You know, he'd probably get a little nervous. Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told them about, Abraham built an altar, put some stones together there, and arranged the wood on it. And then he tied up his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Could you do that? If I was Isaac, I'd have been running a long time ago. Then he reached out his hand and took a knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven. He said, Abraham, Abraham. Here am I, he replied. He said, hey, don't you lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. And Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. And he went over and he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Now, let's get into this real life story and its emotions. Abraham had waited for decades for God to fulfill a promise. He and Sarah never had a son, never had a child, never had. And God promised him one. And it took years, and finally the promise was fulfilled. Abraham and Sarah were desperate. And they finally had their son, Isaac. Isaac, hear me now, was the embodiment of that promise. Isaac was Abraham and Sarah's hope, legacy, and joy. Then comes a shocking command from God in Genesis 22:2. Shocking command. I'll let you read it. A shocking command. Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. It looks like his hope, his legacy, and his joy is about to be taken away from him. Think about it. Ever been there a little bit? Oh, yes. And Abraham's response, he obeys without hesitation. In verse 3, it tells him, Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey. But don't tell me that he wasn't scared. That his emotions were all over the place. But he knew God had spoken. He was not just this calm, cool, and collected. Oh no. He was a man just like you and I. A person just like you and I. But he knew God had spoken. You see, this reflects, though, his deep trust in God, even when the command seemed unbearable and beyond logic. But I want to explain a little bit here. God, see, back then, Abraham, there was no written word. There was no Bible. God had shown himself to Abraham way back and said, I'm the true God, because his family was serving idols. And Abraham knew, but he knew this God here was something different than the cheap idols and demonics that his family and people around him was serving. He knew something was different about this being, and he chose back then to follow him. And God said, Abraham, come with me, and come out of Ur and go to the promised land. I'll show you and all this and this. So he went. But you got to remember, child sacrifice, human sacrifice was a common thing back then. And he had no written word, knowing that God abhors it, that it is totally evil. All he knew is that his God told him to do this. And it was kind of a natural thing, because they were doing it all around him. And so he said, okay, God. He said, okay. And he didn't know God like we know him. We have his written word. In that way, he knew God in a personal way, but he still didn't know that much about his God like we know. Anyway, can you imagine the journey to Moriah? The screaming weight of emotions on this 3-day walk, doubt, pain, maybe even some anger. Every step was an act of surrender as Abraham wrestled with the meaning of this here requirement that God is telling him to do. Why he's going, why is this happening? Have you ever asked, why is this? Why is this happening? Why? Have you asked why? Well, don't tell me that Abraham wasn't asking why. Now let's look at the act of faith. You see, when Isaac asks in verse 7, there in the first 7 says, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb? Abraham answers with profound faith, God himself will provide the lamb. And then in Hebrews 11:17, long time later in the New Testament, God revealed to the writers of Hebrews. And listen to what Abraham thought. He concluded, Abraham answered, okay, by faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. Even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned, Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. So in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the death. You see, Abraham, instead of letting his emotions, his thoughts, all that stuff dictate to him. He kept saying to himself, and I've said this, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to trust God. I don't understand what's happening. I don't like what's happening, but I'm going to trust God. And I believe God promised me that He will, if I have to put that knife in him, He'll raise him from the dead. He had more faith than I did. But in some ways, I've had to come to that 2 different times in my life when I've hit a wall. How about you? That's incredible. He concluded that God was able to raise him up even from the dead. Abraham, hear me now, he kept his focus on trusting and obeying God. Trust and obey. There's no other way. That old hymn. At the final moment, as Abraham raises the knife, God stops and provides a ram. You can read that in verse 10 and verse 13. This moment confirms God's faithfulness and the significance of trusting Him completely. Now, let's get down to us. Imagine a parent, someone, maybe you, having to give up what is most precious to you or to them, a child, a spouse, a dream, or a sense of security. See, this is the level of trust Abraham had in God. How about us? Abraham's wall tested his will against God's will. Make no mistake, there was some contest of wills. But Abraham surrendered to the Lord instead of being stubborn, instead of starting to push back against God, and so forth. He surrendered. It's no different for us, people. No difference. Will we surrender when we feel or know God is asking us the impossible? You think it's the impossible? Or you think it's too hard? I've had so many Christians tell me, well, Pastor, it's just too hard. I just can't go on. I just can't give up this. I just can't embrace that. It's just too hard. That is the wall, and it's baloney when you say it's too hard. It is hard, yes, but not too hard. Not with the Holy Spirit. Not with the Holy Spirit. Yeah. You see, emotional health people, I'm going to now look at something. I want us to look at something here. Emotional health, we're going to take some lessons about emotional health from Abraham. Trusting God through challenges. Let's look at that. Trusting God through challenges. And I know every one of us here has had challenges to one degree or another. Challenges. Hear me now. The story of Abraham shows us that emotional health, hear me now, emotional health, hear me, emotional health is tied to spiritual trust. Your emotional health is tied to your trust in God. Whenever I start losing emotional health and start getting all bent out of shape or going depressed or going negative or going hopeless, It's because I got my eyes on the wrong thing and I'm losing my eyes on the trust of trusting God. And when I get the focus back, things change. It's still hard, but you can do it. You see, hear me, when we face walls in our lives, we are invited to release control and rely totally on Jesus. Yeah. On God's plan for you. It's about us surrendering my will, your will to God. Abraham had to set aside his own desires. He had to set aside his own will. Because isn't it a father or mother to protect your kids? He had to set that aside. And say, I trust you, Lord. He had to lay Isaac into God's hands. His only son. His only child. His hope. His dream. His legacy. He had to do it. He had to trust God's ultimate purpose. This surrender, people, is at the heart of emotional and spiritual growth. It just is. Ask yourself today, what might God be asking me to surrender? Am I holding on to control out of, maybe it's fear, anxiety, or out of selfishness, or pride? Yeah. Number 3, let's look at the wall and its purpose. The wall and its purpose. What is a wall? Well, one author puts it this way. The wall is a spiritual crossroads. The wall is a spiritual crossroads where we confront God's deeper calling in our lives. It shakes us out of shallow faith and to radical dependence on Him. It does. And you see, walls take the form of crisis. There's a loss, a betrayal, a doubt, taking offense. You're angry because something was done to you. Or you're just not getting your way. That's a wall. All of this, people, is not for punishment. Walls, hear me now, write it down, circle this. Walls are opportunities for transformation. To transform you into what God wants of you, of who you are, to put you really on the rock, that you have a firm foundation, and that you have a joy in your life, that the enemy, when he comes to sift you as wheat, he cannot get really anywhere because you're solid. And when he tries to lay depression on you or anything else upon you or whatever, you are standing on a solid foundation. Yeah. People, all of you have spiritual crossroads. Every one of us. Many fail, many don't. And I'm going to tell you something that I've observed. I observed this of Christians throughout the years. There'll be a wall, and they'll start growing in the Lord, and they hit the wall, but they won't trust God and do what they need to do to break through that wall. And they bounce back. And a few will totally then even run away. But this is what Christians know. They have enough love for God that they'll go once again. God will help them. God never gives up on us. And they start growing and going and going. But again, it hits the wall. And instead of going through it, trusting God, they bounce back. And then they keep coming, they get back on their feet, they try again, boom, and they get bounced back. And I've seen Christians do this over and over. I pastored for over 40 years, or 20 years in one place. I've seen it. But then I've seen where finally, there are those, they're done with bouncing off the wall. And they say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you and do it how you're telling me to do. And they break through, and it's a glorious thing. Yes. Let me tell you something. You see, this wall roots out or exposes what needs to be rooted out of our lives. It roots out deeper issues. Deeper issues. And I've got like 7 I'm going to throw out at you. Okay, there's the issue of pride. And don't tell me that you don't have pride. Pride is simply believing we don't need God, or we don't need Him as much as we think we do. Or we don't need Him as much as He knows we need. It's kind of pushing Him away, putting Him on the shelf. Just kind of holding Him off. I saw this once, or more than once, of two people. They're a guy and a gal, and they're maybe even engaged, but one of them has an emotional struggle, and what they do is they push you away with one hand and hold you on with the other. And the person that's being pushed and pulled, after a while, is about ready to lose his mind. Yeah. You know, don't push him away. Because that's what Christians do a lot of time with God. They push him away with one hand, but yet still holding on with the other. And that's a horrible emotional place to be in. It just is. Horrible emotion. Then there's greed. An issue of greed. Oh, yeah. Using God's blessings for selfish gain. Not giving what God would even have us to do is, in the offering places, it can be a form of greed. Luxury. Seeking comfort over faithfulness. I don't think I'm going to go to church this morning. It's so comfy in my bed. Oh, don't tell me you haven't thought of that and even succumbed to that. The trouble with us pastors is we can't do that because we got to be here. Our paycheck depends on it. Then there's wrath. Oh, becoming easily irritated or resentful. Oh, my. Oh, yes, you are not happy. We're not happy how things are going or what's what. Somebody just did something to us and we're just going to stay with that offense. And then there's spiritual gluttony. You know what this is? I've seen this. It's pursuing emotional highs over humble devotion. I know one lady, well, there's really a couple, one in lead and one in what it is that they come from your southern up in the hills, Virginia, where their services are nothing but extreme emotion. I mean, it just, if they're not jumping from the pews and it's all about emotion. And then they come into my church and it's not all about emotion. Then they think something is wrong. Because they have a gluttony. They want this spiritual thing. They can jump a mile high in church, but when they go out there, nothing has changed. So there's that. Then there's spiritual envy. Oh, yeah, comparing ourselves to others' spiritual journey. Oh, as a pastor, I know all about spiritual envy. Their church is growing faster than mine. Oh, I know about spiritual. That's one of the number one struggles that pastors have, spiritual envy in that way. Then there is just simply sloth, being lazy. Yep, laziness in pursuing God and growth. You just aren't putting hardly anything into it. And you'll get out what you put into it. I've had many TBC students and staff say, I didn't get that much out of Bible college. And I flat tell them that's because you didn't put much into it. Me, when I went, I sold out our business, our home, and everything. I was scared spitless. So when I go to Bible college, I'm going to give it everything I got. I'm so scared. Whoa. And I gave it everything I got, and I tell you, I got incredibly out of my Bible college experience. Now, you see, hidden obstacles, or let's call them hidden sins, prevent healthy growth. They block spiritual maturity. They just do, block it. So you see, hitting the wall forces us to confront these issues. So here's a question. What might God want to root out of your life right now to help you grow? And then now let's look at my fourth main point is let's look at 6 stages of faith. This is somebody's author. They're not did this, but there's 6 stages of faith. Okay, number 1, recognizing God. Oh, there is a God. It might be when you first encounter God or the time you began your faith journey and surrendered. The second one is me. As a little boy, I knew the reality of God. He had shown me when I was just a little boy. Nobody could take that away from me. I don't care if it was the teacher in school that was teaching me evolution. I don't care. Nobody could take away. I knew there was a God. But was I smart enough to embrace him? No. Cliff Sheldon wanted to do what he wanted to do, and he put God on the shelf, and he went and did what he wanted to do to a certain point. I wasn't going to tempt him too much. I wasn't going to try to go around the corner drinking and going around the corner at 220 miles an hour or something. You know, I wasn't going to do that to others. No. I had a healthy fear, you see, of God in some ways. I just wasn't going to get too crazy. You understand me? Anyway, so there's that. So for me, it's when I surrendered to the Lord. So that's number 1, recognition of God. Number 2 is life of discipleship. You start learning about God. You start studying Scripture. You start serving. You begin walking in relationship with God. Okay? Then there's number 3, the productive life. Your faith becomes active. You focus on purpose, ministry, and even leadership. Okay? And then number 4, then there's the wall. the wall. Oh, that wall. The wall. The wall is simply you face a deep spiritual challenge that forces you to address hidden hurts, hidden doubts, hidden patterns, habitual sins in your life. You hit a wall, and what are you going to do? And I've seen some hit that wall, deny Jesus, and walk away. Even a couple of them that we invested so much in, I believed in them with everything. I just believed in them. But there came a wall, and they walked away. I've seen a mother walk away from a husband and 3 children. Walk away. Walk away from God, from her family. Walk away. No, that's not you, Sarah. You know, they hit a wall. I've hit a wall a couple times of not rejecting God totally, oh no, but I said, God, I had enough of the ministry. I'm out of here. Mary, there's the suitcase. I got the keys. I'm done. That's right. God goes, no, you're not. And because I love my God, do you love your God? That's what it really gets down to. Will you love him enough that you'll trust him to go through that wall? To put the suitcase back into the garage and the keys back out of the car. So that's the fourth. Recognition of God, life discipleship, the productive life, and then that wall. And then number 5, the journey inward. Oh, the journey inward. That's what Pastor Andrew and Jen are doing right now with your Wednesday night. The journey inward. The journey inward. You engage in deeper self-reflection and intimacy with God, and often humbling yourself to let others help you. That's where it's at. I don't care, that's where it's at. And then number 6, the journey outward. You emerge with renewed purpose, serving with humility and maturity. Hitting the wall is a turning point, people, and many give up. But many don't. I trust neither one of you here will. But pushing through, people, pushing through moves you from the surface level of faith, oh, the surface level of faith, to a life of deeper trust, purpose, and love. In Sunday school, it was about the church and to love one another. And Beth said to me, tell us, what is love? And I said, love is a fuzzy emotion. It is infatuation. It's having warm fuzzies. No, it's not. Oh, come on. You remember when back when you were all in love? I do. She was the best thing. Oh, my. I loved that girl. No, I was really a Twitter-pated. Oh, the infatuation. Oh, I remember when Jen was after Andrew. Oh, I remember. Oh, no. We moved to Watertown, And we had a drum set with the plexiglass around it, and Andrew was in there. And even the youth group kids put up a sign that said, "Don't feed the animal." And she came in 8th grade and saw him. And then she saw her, but then you went off to college and separated for a while, and then they come back together. I'll tell you a story better than you can. I watched it with interest and with trepidation and with prayer. Yep. Because I knew my son. He wasn't the catch she thought he was. And I knew she wasn't quite the catch he thought she was. You know, that's what infatuation does, doesn't it? Then we come to a spot in our marriages and lives that we go, "I don't like you." And as my beautiful wife always says to me once in a while, she'll say, and I've told you this, she'll say to me, "I don't like you right now, but I do love you." There was no warm fuzzies. There was no infatuation. She wanted no intimacy. Oh, you guys are going. Anyway. Love is then hitting the wall that you're going to work things together and work it out, even though we all have some faults. And some of us more than others. I always told Mary and I, we did a lot of marriage seminars and even raising kids. And I always admitted I was the harder one to live with. But you know what? It made her more of a woman of God because she really prayed. So I still took credit. Just don't get too proud about it, though. Okay. Who remembers old Pastor John Brady and Naomi? Yeah, he pastored this church for years. And when they were in college, they got married. And he was a bugger. And she would go to old Brother Davidson, and Brother Davidson say to her, "Naomi, do you have knees?" "Well, yeah, Brother Davidson, I got knees." "Use them." Get down on your knees and use them. And Sarah, I believe you've been on your knees a lot, haven't you? Mary sure has, so you're in good company. Okay, I better get going here, huh, Andrew? So where am I at? I don't even know where am I at. Oh yeah, the journey outward, hitting the wall. Oh yeah, many give up. But here it is, people. Here it is. Please hear me. But pushing through that wall, pushing through, moves you from surface level. I already said this, but I'll say it again. The surface level of faith to a life of deeper trust, purpose, and love. And I can truly say, Mary and I, in our marriage, we have. And with our God, we have. Remember, if you really serve God, it's like this. God is up here. And you're here and here, the bottom triangle. And as you go towards God, what will you do? You get closer and closer to each other. That's a fact. But it takes two of you. Illustrate. Do you know someone who faced a wall in their faith and emerged stronger? Sure. Biblically, how about Peter? He said, I'm not, boy, I'll die for you, Jesus. And then the coward went and denied him 3 times. Now, I'm not calling him a coward. If I was him, I'd have done the same. I mean, believe you me, I'm not being negative towards him. I think I'd have done better? Nah. Anyway, so there's a biblical Peter. There's the pastor that back when I was in lead, he was a youth pastor that was preaching our youth convention. He was a young man. And his wife, he and him, they had a child. And then something happened, and she had a blood transfusion. This back in the 90s, early 90s. And she was infected with AIDS, including the baby she was carrying in her womb. And they prayed hard. They had the baby. The baby had AIDS. She had AIDS. They prayed hard. But both of them died, and there he has a little child. And it was at this point when he was preaching to us. You're too young yet. You weren't at the youth convention. He hit a wall. The pain and hurt. I always wondered about him, what happened to him. And do you know, some years later in the Pentecostal Evangel or something, they had his story. God, in time, gave him another wife and gave him a couple more kids. He stayed trusting God instead of saying, God, you let me down. I don't want anything to do with you. Oh, there's more stories I could tell. Stories of ones in the churches we pastored. Horrid stories. Horrid stories. I think I'll take the time. Oh, you and Jen know her well. Sherry. I don't want to give a name out here. She was the only girl of many brothers. And she was a young teenager, and her parents had left for the weekend, and they were in a small town, and small towns there's Friday nights and they're whatever. And a guy she knew, this is her testimony, and she's given it publicly many times. A guy she knew said, hey, come with me. I want some advice for you about my girlfriend, or about something there. She jumps in. Well, he takes her out. And she's a fighter, and she's strong. And she fought him, and he about choked her to death, and you know what he did to her. He brings her back in. She's shocked, shell-shocked, drops her out on the street, and there she's sitting. Don't know what to do. And he picks up another guy, and they come around, and they grab her and take her again for the whole weekend, using her. All she remembers is being back in her bed Sunday night. She went to her priest after a year or two and tried to talk to him, and he just told her to get over it. I have no time for that. She gets married to a very abusive man, has 3 children. He tries to kill her. Went with a shotgun. He was going to shoot her, and it misfired. Ran her off the road. Crash. Tried to. Finally, she got the courage to leave him. She was working at a place, and she met another man. She wasn't this other man, and in time she become pregnant, and they get married. But then she goes to a church and finds Jesus. they come together and they raise their kids in church. They help me build my house. That's how close we are to them. And you know what she'll tell you about that experience? About that horrid marriage? About that? She'll say, I remember it well. But God has done such a restoration thing in me. I remember it, but it has no effect on me anymore. That's what she'll tell you. I remember it, but it's like just free. She hit a wall different times. And she embraced her Jesus when she met him. She always had a belief in God, but she had no one to help her really connect with God. When she did. I'm about done. Number 5. Just a couple, real quick, some practical steps for journeying through the wall. Hear me. First, your focus, my focus must be surrendering my will, your will to God's will, just like Abraham. What you do is you get on your knees instead of pushing him away or getting so mad at him that you don't want him around. Pray for the courage to release your control and trust God's plan. Pray for the courage to release control and trust God. Spend time in Scripture. Spend time meditating on God's promises. Proverbs 3, 5 through 6, and it's our last one. Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. A lot of you know it. It's a famous one, but it is absolutely correct. Well, all Scripture is, but anyway. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. That's key. That doesn't mean you won't have emotions, you won't have some doubts and this and that. People, you will. Don't let that throw you. I have many times continued to trust God even though I was thinking, geez, I don't think it's going to happen. But I kept hanging on. You know what I mean? So don't trusting God with all your heart isn't meaning, oh, I know He's got it. I have no emotions. I totally know. No, you've got no emotions. You've got some doubts. But you're still hanging Him with all your heart. And you're saying, nope, I'm going to trust Him. I'm going to trust Him. I'm going to trust Him. And then lean not on your own understanding because you don't understand why this is happening. You cannot understand what in the world, why? Why did I have to be raised that way? Why this? Why that? Why? Huh. Don't lean on your own understanding of trying to figure it out. You don't need to figure it all out. You just don't. You don't have to understand. And then in all your ways, submit to Him. I mean, submit to Him. Submit to Him. And what is He going to do? He will. In time, He will make your path straight and get you really going, and you'll be, wow, I'm glad I stayed with God through that one. There it is. Practical steps for journeying through the wall. Focus on surrendering. Next, there's 3 things that one must put into practice. 3 things. Awareness, forgiveness, and acceptance. Awareness, forgiveness, and acceptance. Let's look at awareness. Awareness is simply this. Reflect honestly and humbly on what is beneath the surface of your life. What makes you tick? Get an awareness of why am I acting like this? Why am I feeling like this? What's the bottom line? Mary and I do that to each other. When I am all upset and all out of shape, she'll say, Cliff, what is it that you took into your spirit? What irritation did you take in? What thought did you take in? that is causing this kind of emotional reaction. And I'll sit back and I'll say, okay, God, and I'll go down, and usually, not every time, but mostly, something will come. Oh, I know, I took in something that is irritating me. You know, be aware, what is your fears? What is your pride? Why are you so stinking stubborn? Why do you have doubts? Why do you have these desires that are keeping you stuck? That's what you're doing Wednesday night, I think. Forgiveness. Okay, so awareness, and that's forgiveness. I'm telling you, in this life, you're going to have... Oh, things are always going to make you mad. You forgive. Forgiveness is truly releasing bitterness and resentments towards others, or even towards yourself. I don't have time, but I got a story that'll just make the wind blow through your hair on a man that I took to Jamestown to the psych ward. And when I asked him, who are you not forgiving? And he began to name them out and say, I forgive him. When I got there, they said, he doesn't need to be here. God totally just flipped. I'm telling you, he was dangerous to himself and to others. He was so out of it. So there's awareness, forgiveness, and then acceptance. You got to forgive, okay? And you sometimes even got to forgive yourself. Oh, yes, you do. You got to let it go because you know you made a horrible mistake. You know something you know. Please let God bring forgiveness into you where you can let it go and, in a sense, forgive yourself. And then there's acceptance. Trust. You know what acceptance is? It's trusting, accepting that God's plans are good. Even if they don't align with your own. Understand something. When a person, you are emotionally unhealthy, you will be way too reactive to people and situations, to coworkers, even church people, whatever. When you're emotionally unhealthy, you're way too reactive. So I conclude with this. Remember, would you come? Remember Abraham's example. Abraham trusted God through the hardest life test, I'm telling you. He did. His wall was to sacrifice Isaac. It became a defining moment for him. Let your walls become a defining moment for you for good, not for evil, not to destroy you or destroy others, but to bring you into restoration. You see, that's what it's about. God provided just as He always does, and He will for us. Again, walls are not the end of faith. They are, hear me, they are an invitation to deeper transformation. Trust God to root out that pride or fear or selfishness or stubbornness or unforgiveness to shape you into who He created you to be. What wall are you facing today? What wall are you facing? Here it is. Will you trust God and put the work in to lead you through it? Quit blaming others. Quit being critical. Even yourself, toward yourself. Just look up. So today, people, let's stand. I'm going to get an altar call. If you feel like you're at a wall or you're at some crossroads, Will you humble yourself and let us pour out our prayers and love on you? Because that's what it's about. Will you do that today? Will you do that? He is here. And He's not silent. Oh, He's speaking. Yes, He is. He's drawing. He's saying, come to me, you who are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. But keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Is there someone here? Is there somebody's here? Please just let us surround you with our love. Is there anybody here? Just come. Just come. Just come. Yes. Yes. Is there anybody else?